right. Hello. Okay. Good evening. My name's Ariana McLean. I'm a second year MFA student here at Stony Brook University studying creative writing with all these beautiful, wonderful readers, writers, artists, magical people here tonight. And with that, I welcome you to the first of two MFA student readings for the fall semester. Tonight, you'll be hearing from Margot Hughes, Mary Mannion, William Stieglitz, Hudson Amethyst Hess, Grace Dilger, Karina Cohn, Alex Sniatkowski, Larissa Urcia, Kristofer Barr, Rajdeep Paulus. These are some wonderful classmates of mine who you'll be hearing from. Some are also wonderful teachers at Stony Brook's undergraduate creative writing program as well. So tonight, before we started our live stream, we were all kind of chit-chatting backstage, and we were recognizing that tonight is the full moon. Also, this morning was the final lunar eclipse of the year, and tonight's full moon is dubbed the Beaver full moon. So we wanted to kind of dedicate our readings tonight to the Beaver full moon. It's a time when beavers take shelter in their lodges, having laid up sufficient stores of food for the long winter ahead. So we hope to kind of gather all our creativity and inspiration amongst each other, and hopefully we'll have that bring us through this winter that's coming up. So I'll start off, and since it is the full moon, I thought I'd read an excerpt from an essay I've been working on this semester in Molly Gaudry's class. It's an essay class, and it's about my mom, who is an important person, and from her I learned to embrace kind of all the things surrounding the moon and magic and womanhood and all that sort of stuff. I'll begin. My mother is a true believer in rebirth, in metamorphosis. One of her works, a mixed media on canvas, prominently states in acrylic paint, "This is for those who can resurrect their lives," and it hangs over her at-home altar. Despite being raised Jewish, her favorite holiday is Easter. She's a lover of butterflies, always trying to support the monarch population. She grows milkweed and collects caterpillars, which she houses in a homemade habitat to protect them from predators so that they may safely undergo their birthright and metamorphose into the regal black and orange butterflies. Butterflies who will migrate to Mexico, a sojourn that takes several generations. My earliest memory flickers in my mind's eye, shrouded in hazy shades of blue. It may not even be a real memory, but does that really matter? My mom sits cross-legged on the floor of an empty room. The curtainless window lets in street light. She is there cradling my newborn brother, nursing him as she hums a song. She's wearing a silk slip that will become my favorite item to wear when we play dress up. I'm sitting next to her, a 2-year-old toddler, lovingly gazing up at my mother. The invisible bond connecting us is undeniable. I try to emulate her motherly behavior, cradling my own doll, known always and forever as baby, close to my chest. She continues to hum and I hum along, too, grinning brightly, my eyes heavy with tired. Mother and daughter in this false urban moonlight. This, like so many of my early memories, is haloed in shades of blue. Blue, the color of calm, the color of the sky, the color of the sea, though the water does draw its color only through reflection. Water is such a feminine force. Like the tides, our menstrual flows are affected by the moon cycle. Mamawati, the water goddess whose image can be found across cultures around the world. Oftentimes she's depicted as a mermaid, a siren, a water spirit. It is from my mom that I learned of Mamawati, of magic, of mermaids, of the power of intuition and feminine energy. It's hard not to think of my mom when I think of mermaids. On hot summer weekends, my mother would take me and my brother to one of the man-made lakes at Pahole, Maryland. We'd rejoice in the coolness of the water and the air in its proximity. Before we could really swim, our mother would give us rides on her back as she dove deep into the depths of the filled quarry, then rushing up, breaking the water's surface. Water droplets on our eyelashes would sparkle in the sun as we screamed out in joy. Our beautiful mermaid mommy, whether she was in or out of the water, her hair always in long layers of loose curls, and that she colors golden hues like sun rays, just like the portrait I drew of her in second grade that I backed intuitively in sky blue colored pencil. Thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Margot Hughes. Margot, I've been enjoying reading your work this semester in Luann Walker's Heart of the Story class. Margot is in her second year of the MFA program, and she'll be reading a personal essay she wrote this semester in Roger's Life, Love, and Responsibility class. So let's give it up for Margot.
Thanks, Ariana. So this is called The Gift of Food. Food is my family's love language. We don't hug or kiss, don't say it aloud. Love is practically a four-letter word for the Hughes family, but we show it through food. It is a gift to one another, a glue for quality time, a source of conversation. None of us are chefs, and the food isn't always good, never anything special. But a cold spinach pie means Memorial Day weekend and the opening of Uncle Dennis's pool. 2 sweet baked beans mean 4th of July barbecue and cornhole at Aunt Peggy's. Broccoli casserole is Thanksgiving, and cheddar cheese potatoes are Christmas. I learned about my father's upbringing through food. He and his 6 brothers and sisters used it as a source of humor, a way to dance around the parts of his childhood that weren't so funny, parts that may have been painful. Dad didn't tell me they had no money, only that his mother's staple dinner recipe was a bed of saltines and American cheese slices covered with warm Campbell's tomato soup. He devours bread and butter any chance he can now. Bread was given to fill up when there wasn't enough for seconds, and butter was strictly reserved for my grandfather. He was the one who worked for it after all, so my grandmother and her 7 children had to settle for margarine. Dad and his siblings still cackle over the fury in my grandfather's eyes when my dad announced that he was a vegetarian. Refusing the meat he worked so hard to put on the table was the utmost insult to my father's father. In some buried way, a refusal of food meant a refusal of love. He went on to question my dad's sexuality and call him names I'd rather not repeat, but Dad laughs all that off too. My Aunt Peggy told me that she was on potato duty growing up. She's a professional potato cooker. The 9 of them went through a sack each night. To my shocked reaction, she replied, "Well, we're Irish," in her thick Staten Island accent. I didn't mind. I've never met a potato I didn't like. And she laughed her boisterous laugh. Aunt Peggy brings her potato salad to every family gathering, mostly for me. It's my favorite family food. I didn't know until recently that it was actually my grandmother's recipe. I've never met my grandmother, but I would give anything for 1 hour in the kitchen with her, boiling potatoes and chopping onions. Most of my family members and I don't have much to talk about between their devout Catholicism and conservative politics. But I can always ask Aunt Peggy to remind me just one more time for this potato salad recipe. For the secret to cooking potatoes to perfection, the exact ratio of potatoes to mayonnaise, the perfect amount of the secret ingredient, pickle juice. And when the Thanksgiving table gets quiet amongst all of us and the silence of our immense ideological differences starts to take over, I can always make a peace offering by simply lifting the bowl of stuffing and asking the word that means so much. More? Thank you.
Thanks, Margot, and thanks for sharing. And also, I too have not met a potato I don't like. So up next, we have Mary Mannion. Mary is a good friend of mine. We met early on in our MFA career, I suppose we could call it. She's in her second year of the MFA program here at Stony Brook and is currently working on a novel called Unimportant Things. This evening, Mary will be sharing an excerpt from a story that she wrote in 2018 called Where I Sat. So take it away, Mary Mannion.
Thanks, Ariana. So yeah, I'm going to be reading from a short story I wrote called Where I Sat. As I kicked through the October leaves on the sidewalk leading back to my dorm, I passed by some older guys who I'd met at a party the weekend before. There was Tyler with his backwards baseball hat and Seamus with his casual, not going anywhere fast walk. I'd been drinking at their frat house when we met. They taught me how to play slap cup and had cheered me on when I slapped someone else's plastic cup off the beer pong table, achieving the objective of the game. Yes, Janie, Tyler, the older one, had said, offering his palm in the air for a high five. That was awesome. I took my hand out of my jacket pocket and waved hello to them, but quickly, after a brief glance in my direction, they passed me by. Oh, I had thought they would remember me. Anderson College was new to me still, but in some tired, bleak way, it felt old. I'd been waiting my entire life for college, and now that it was here, I found that it was not what I'd imagined. Mom had always told me that college was a gift and a blessing, and I'd never get another time quite this special in my life. College, Mom had said, would be a uniquely valuable experience that was all about figuring out what I wanted to study and testing the boundaries of what I was capable of. Since my sophomore year of high school, I'd requested brochures from universities all over the country, and when they came in the mail, I studied them page by page before tucking them safely into the drawer of my bedroom desk. But now that I was here, I was finding that everything was hard. The grass that had looked so lush in the Anderson pamphlet was itchy and rough when you actually sat on it. The doors to the buildings across campus were uniformly heavy, as though if you didn't have the strength to pull 100 pounds with ease, then you didn't belong. The girls acted friendly on the surface, but not far below, you could see it. Their judgment, their competitiveness, their, I'm better, at least, than you, which makes me not the worst. And the nights, so shiny with their promises, made you feel, time after time, alone. It was the strangest type of loneliness, because you could be with anyone you wanted at any time of the day, but no one ever seemed to be around. Lola was a cross-country runner with a gaunt, kind face, whose wavy black ponytail rocked side to side behind her as she ran. I'd met her in my anthropology class back in September, before our first written exam, when I'd forgotten to bring a pen. Here, she'd said, handing me an extra pen with her thin, silver-ringed fingers. You can keep it. Thanks, I said, smiling. When I wrote with it, the ink was dark and clean, and I ended up doing well on the exam. From then on, Lola and I were something close to friends. She'd say hi to me when we passed each other in the dining hall, and we'd discuss nonsense as we sat and waited for our professor to arrive and begin class. Friendship with Lola wasn't much. We didn't eat lunch together or text each other links to obscure alternative songs while we were supposed to be gathering sources for research papers, but the fact that Lola liked me did more for me than any other regular, real relationship would. It felt as though Lola had picked me out of a crowd, and she was happy with her choice. One Sunday night, I ran into Lola and her boyfriend Smith in the library. Usually after dinner on Sundays, people sat tucked away behind tall bookshelves in crammed little cubicles, scribbling fast and speed reading through work that they'd spent the weekend procrastinating. Lola, on the other hand, was sitting with Smith at a wide table in an open part of the library's second floor. Through a sliver in the stacks, she caught my eye. Janie, Lola called out. No one, other than her, used that sort of loud volume in the library. Is that you? Come here. Come over here. I felt like a shy little kid as I scurried through the aisle between two looming bookshelves over to the table where she and Smith were studying. This is Smith, she'd said, gesturing toward him with a flick of her wrist. Her palm was upward-facing and open, as though she were serving him to me on a platter. Right away, I could tell that Smith was special. He had a grin that stretched farther to the right than to the left, and dark brown eyes with heavy eyelids that made him look stoned. Smith had an air about him that made me want to know what he was thinking. What did he like, and who did he know? But I had a feeling that I never would have detected that about him if Lola hadn't seen it first. All the guys I tended to pick, I realized, were the ones who other people had already liked. I had a poster of Andrew from the band Cat Bazaar up on my dorm room wall, but he, of course, was a famous rock star. In real life, the boys who I liked were always on the baseball team or the lacrosse team, or were, if nothing else, undeniably cute. The work of choosing them had already been done for me. They'd been pre-screened, approved. I figured that if I let other people make my decisions for me, then I couldn't be blamed if later on I ended up being wrong. And of course I would end up being wrong. I wasn't like Lola, who knew what she wanted the instant she saw it. She didn't waste her time waiting around to consider what anyone else thought. Lola and Smith both sat comfortably, with their textbooks flat and open before them, and they were passing an Arizona iced tea bottle back and forth, unscrewing its lid and taking quick sips. Whatever they were drinking smelled tangy from where I stood, and not like iced tea. Lola, Smith said, you gotta add more juice to this next time. It tastes like straight whiskey. Babe, stop, Lola said, taking the drink from his hand. We're not supposed to be drinking in the library. Ripped out notebook pages were strewn loosely across the table. An apple eaten to its core rested next to Lola's elbow on the wood. It was almost funny, in a hopeless way, how different I was from Lola. Whenever I studied in the library, I tried to take up as little space as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. That was so fun and I felt like it made me very nostalgic of kind of high school, college times, undergrad college times. So up next, we have William Stieglitz. William is in his third year of the MFA program here at Stony Brook and is working on his thesis. William writes fiction, plays, and poetry and is currently working on a novel. So without further ado, here's William.
Thank you. I'm going to be reading a fantasy piece I wrote called Ocean Diet. Alexa, having a high tolerance for salt, did not have much difficulty drinking up the entire ocean. She did not mean to swallow the whole thing, just a little to bring the water level down, even enough that her 8-year-old body could go deeper to where her parents stood ahead. The salt and the seaweed she slurped reminded her of the kale chips her mom would tell her not to eat because they were her special diet food, but that Alexa took nibbles of anyway when she wasn't looking. Next came the taste of tuna, then herring, then other tangy flavors she didn't know. She slurped it all up so easily, the big fish and sharks and crustaceans and whales, without needing to chew. It was all part of the liquid, and the liquid could be drunk, so naturally everything small enough to fit in the liquid could fit down her throat too. Alexa didn't even realize until after that last slurp that she was standing dry on the sand, the water around her gone, all the water in front of her gone. The seafloor lay spread out like a desert, all the fish and plant life inside her, and before her stood her parents, bewildered. They took her to see the doctor right away. He put a stethoscope over her heart and told her to breathe, but could only hear the deep rumble of brine. When he told her to, Alexa opened wide. With his small doctor's light, he could see wave crests lapping just under her tongue. Finally, the doctor had them wait outside his office for what felt like forever. It was 10 minutes before inviting them in. Your daughter is perfectly healthy, he told them. It seems she ingested a larger than normal quantity of ocean water while at the beach. While most children her age accidentally swallow between 0.4 and 2.2 milliliters on average, she ingested approximately 1.3 billion cubic kilometers. This is largely inconsequential. With a healthy diet and exercise, she should be just fine. The parents weren't especially satisfied, but Alexa thought he did a good job, especially since she got a lollipop at the end. They tried to live life like normal, which was surprisingly easy for a while, until they went out for seafood. What do you mean all your fish items are unavailable? The father asked. The waitress apologized, but the fisheries weren't bringing things in anymore. Fine, I'll have the crab then, the father said. They were out of crab too. They could get him a cheeseburger if he'd like. Who goes out to a seafood restaurant for cheeseburgers? Alexa tried to take good care of the ocean inside her. She got fish food from the pet store and downed the flakes so the smallest fish would have something nice to eat. The big fish were always snacking on them, and she figured the small ones deserved a treat too. Some days, especially when there was a storm, the waters would turn hectic inside her. She'd sit still with the stomachache and study the fish inside until the storm passed, reading to them from her picture book. That always helped when she was scared. At night, she fell asleep to whale songs. Sometimes, when her parents were asleep and the pull of the moon on the watery body inside her kept her up, she'd sneak off to the beach, where confused seagulls pecked at dried sand in the dark. Alexa would stand where the shoreline was and try to imagine laps of icy foam against her toes. Someday, when she was older and didn't need another world inside her, she would spit the ocean back up, send back all the creatures, the coral and crustaceans and salted seaweed, in a deluge that would bring every taste back through her mouth and fill the hollow she left. The world would want the ocean back. As for the fish, she didn't know if they cared or even noticed. They had gone from one container to another. The the world within it the same to them, even if it filled a different space. She would send it all back someday when she was less alone. But for now, she would stare up at the moon and feel a tugger almost off the land. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for that sea-centric story. That was really imaginative and beautiful. Thank you. Up next, we have Hudson Amethyst Hess. When asked for a bio, Hudson sent me a love-filled sentiment that I am overjoyed to read to you all because I feel like we can always use more love, give more love, and share more love. So Hudson is engaged to the most beautiful lady in the world, Tiara, and they are parents to a fluffball cat named Puffalum. Without them, Hudson would not be here reading for you today. Let's give it up to Hudson.
Thanks, guys. Okay, here we go. The snow was knee-deep. Kate, my kitty corner neighbor, had come by earlier. The two of us had decided to build a snowman next to my house. Kate would be going to school with me in another year or so. Her brother was my age, in 3rd grade, but we'd long since passed the threshold of boys and girls being friends without it being a thing. Somewhere along the way, Katie, the girl across the street, had shown up and asked to pitch in. Katie was my age, but I barely knew her. She went to a different school, one with a bus that picked her up each morning. I'd catch glimpses of her sometimes dashing across her yard in her gray and black uniform, but that was about it. Admittedly, I was kind of jealous. Most days, I walked a little over a mile to school, but not today. Snow days, the great equalizer, blanketed barriers that usually would have kept kids like us apart, and we were glad for Katie's help. For hours, or it felt like hours, we worked. We didn't launch one snowball that entire time. We didn't even make any snow angels, which was usually my go-to on snowy days. No, we had the workforce, we had the determination. It had to be a snowman. Finally, I clambered up the porch and poked my head inside. I knew better than to trail a big wet mess into the kitchen. I eyed the fridge, mere feet away from the door. Hey, can we have a carrot? After a good minute or so, Nana, my mother's grandmother, came shuffling in. Her expression was hard to read, but that was typical. I know there were times when she smiled, but I can best recall that ever stoic expression of hers. She peered out the door, wordlessly, then went to the fridge and grabbed my requested carrot out of the drawer. I haven't got coal for the eyes, she warned me. Plenty of raisins, though. She pressed the small red box into my hands along with a gnarled carrot. She wrinkled her nose. Now hurry up and shut the door. You're letting the hot air out. With a quick thanks, I darted back outside to rejoin my construction team. Before long, we had successfully impaled the carrot into the snowman's face, built tiny, beady little eyes and a lopsided grin from the raisins. And as our pièce de résistance, I had taken off my scarf to drape around his neck. We all stood there for a minute, captivated by our own handiwork, when suddenly, "Kids, come here," Nana was calling us. Kate and I gave each other a look. Nana didn't love having kids over. A play date at my house was a whole affair. Nana needed everything planned and approved too far in advance for kids as impulsive as we were. So most days, we either ran around outside or went to Kate's house instead. To our surprise, though, as we stepped up to the porch, Nana handed each of us a brown mug full of hot cocoa. There were tiny marshmallows on top, already melting into a thin puddle of white. "Thanks, Nana," I said, leading off a chorus from Kate and Katie alike. That time I was sure Nana smiled. Yes, well, that's a very nice snowman. Abruptly, a voice called out from across the street. Katie's mom beckoning her home. Immediately, Katie was crestfallen. She looked from her mother to her mug. Nana lifted a hand. "Why don't you just take it with you? You can bring the mug back later." Katie's devastation melted away. "Thank you, Mrs. Walters. I will, I promise. Thank you." She turned and darted off as quickly as someone could with the steaming mug in her hands, crossing the threshold of her house and vanishing from our line of sight. I waved goodbye, thinking about how nice Nana had been. I wondered if that meant Katie would come back more often. Maybe we'd be friends now. When I turned to Nana, though, any warmth had drained right out of her face. Her eyes, milk bright blue like mine, had gone cold as she stared at the house across the street. "I'm never going to see that mug again," she remarked, sounding more bitter than the coffee had tasted. "Her mother's probably throwing it in the trash as we speak." "What?" I sputtered. Was she kidding? You don't know that. It had been fun playing with Katie that day. Why would her mom throw out something of Nana's? What kind of adult did that? She'll bring it back. Nana sighed and she gave me one of those looks, only it wasn't quite stoic. It was something a little different. There was something in her gaze, but I didn't know then what it was. Looking back, though, I know it was exhaustion. She was a pragmatic woman in her 90s who held her first full-time job before she was a teenager, and she was completely exasperated by the depth of my naivety. She opened her mouth to say something, but sighed the thought away. You've been out for a while. Come warm up, you two. I'll make some Campbell's. Well, we didn't need to be told twice. As we scrambled to get inside, I glanced over my shoulder and saw Nana shoot one last scathing glare across the street. Like I said, Nana didn't like to have people over. But as I learned later, she hated the thought of someone watching and judging anything to do with her home more. And in the end, she was right. Nana never did get that mug back.
Thank you for sharing. That was great. I identify with Nana a little bit. I have a Nana myself who is a little similar. And also now I want to build a snowman and have hot chocolate. So thanks again. So up next, we have Grace Dilger. Grace Dilger is a poet, educator, and MFA candidate at Stony Brook University, set to graduate in December. It's very exciting. Her work has been featured in Peach Fuzz magazine, the Southampton Review, the Brooklyn Quarterly, the Elevation Review, Grotty Mag, and proud to be Writings by American Warriors, Volume 9. So Grace, here's the mic.
Thank you, Ariana, and thank you for hosting, and thank you for Frank for being our tech guru. I'm going to read a couple poems. This one is called Norma Jean. As an ugly child, I was very interested in beautiful people who were miserable like Marilyn. I have no gooey, melting summer ice pop curves, but I have felt devoured too. I visited the windmill house where her and that collegiate meat slab made two babies, which slid liquid out of her like a foot from a slipper while the blades carved the breeze. We have tasted the same salty Atlantic, driven the same roads, pined after the affections of our mothers. I can act as she could act, daily as a light ray, a spectacle of spunk. And this is called Pink, but in all caps with the exclamation point, like the early aughts Victoria's Secret pink. That was on everyone's butts. The girls swipe left and right. One has the same blue backpack as I do. Too much bottom eyeliner, her underlids wet quills, her hair curls from a tube. I remember the crunch in my palms. The girl says to her friend, who is dressed in all light wash denim and carries a pink mesh bag, "What is your age range?" "Mine's 18 to 23. No, 22. Her friend says, "Mine's 18 to 26. No, 28. Their skin is luminous, almost wet. I wonder about their parents, remembering at 13 the way a boy's hands tremor and dally, the way a man's contain. The smell of boys sweet and sour, but men a funk, formal forest, an earned odor. I can taste the trampoline, my tongue pinched in a coil. The boy rolled over, the giggles that broke from his mouth like a lasagna tray on tile, accidental and shameful. I feel the bristle of wood chips between my butt and thighs, while the man who drove a man's truck, worked a man's job, had the broken nose of a man, stuck his digits in me one by one, told me he wanted to sign for the cartilage piercing I desperately wanted, but which required an adult signature. I just have to scroll down a little bit. And this is called Watching Mad Men. He pets me the way I'm sure his father pets his mother, the same "you're an adorable animal" feel. I feel like I don't get catcalled as often as I used to, which shouldn't bother me, except I feel less beautiful. Passing a homeless man, his feet two stoned rutabagas, I'm almost insulted that he doesn't congratulate me on my mother, or reach a quivering hand out to linger in the air I pass through. Sometimes I feel like a live action contradiction. PSAs starring small, bespectacled girls tinkering away in a miniature lab or at a space camp, finding numbers divisible by other numbers, promoting young girls to take interest in math and science. I never did. Space controls everything. Space, we are born from space. We come from space, made of stardust. We are space. Numbers make the universe seem less like a drunk uncle. Space is everything. Nothing could be obvious up there. Pleiades, the seven sisters, chased by the dominant male aggressive Orion. The perv ran them down for 7 years. They begged, Zeus, help us, Zeus, we're at your feet. Zeus will suck your, and finally Zeus took pity, transforming the exhausted women into a star cluster visible to almost anyone, anywhere on Earth. Almost a decade of begging for a moment of sweet relief. The Kesha of star clusters breathed easily for a second before the gods placed a club-raised Orion in the sky, violently adjacent to the maidens, where he would spend eternity hunting them, and they would spend it shining, putting on brave star cluster face, contouring their gaunt star cluster cheeks, applying fake star cluster eyelashes, injecting star clustered collagen into their metallic lips, incessantly posting star clustered Instagrams, making star cluster duck face, hoping other former maidens turned star clusters might like their pick and tell other star clusters how jealous they are of Pleiades, who live such a fabulous life, just a stardust throw away from their assailant, the honorable Orion, the hunter. And I'll read one more called Promise Me No Politics. In Wilmington, the humidity will conk you like a fish bat to a red drum skills. My mother says crime breeds poverty, not the other way around. I listen to ear hustle, the get-arounds of San Quentin like a hot plate chowder, penis towel, pet snails, the boom boom room. An inmate worries he won't remember how it is you give a hug. Such is the power of touch. I hold my brother's loaves of hands, willing mine be sutures, or else an orbital polisher, buff out hood rat, buff out gook. They say they need to help themselves. I don't catch any fish all week. My burns sting before they flatter me. My brother calls me a very good person Monday, then my mother a fat drunk Wednesday, and the vitamin D is seeping in between. My mother reads the news to her girlfriend. A UPS delivery man won't help a grandpa who's fallen because of a no-touch COVID protocol. Diane responds, was he Black? I ignore my brother's calls when the protests begin in New York. I tell him now I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. I'm never ready to hear those animals. What is the opposite of an oil spill? How many cockles high do my stacked excuses rise? How ripped is the tide of my cowardice? I bob in the Atlantic, astounded at the ablution of being where I am usually not. I sweat now, panting in the truth that I never was. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Your words are just amazing. There's such fluidity and power, and you vary the pace, and it's so dynamic. So thank you for sharing and performing. So up next, we have Karina Cohn. So first off, I'm just going to say Karina is probably one of the reasons why I am at this MFA program. She gave me a little tour, an unofficial tour, when I was thinking about applying, and was just so lovely and welcoming. So thank you. Karina is a multi-genre writer in her last semester at Stony Brook. Her writing has been published in the Brooklyn Rail, Chronogram, and the Stone Throw Review. Tonight, Karina Cohn will be reading an excerpt from her thesis, Nested Doll, which is a memoir. So take it away, Karina.
Thank you. Ariana, I'm so happy you're here. I was so thrilled. I was wondering, is she gonna come? You know, is she here? I didn't know for a while. Now, obviously I do. Anyway, thank you for the introduction, and Grace, thank you for reading so many great lines. So this is probably one of the only sections in my thesis that can maybe be read out of context. It's very early on. I use material culture as a jumping point to talk about different things, themes, womanhood, sexuality, loss, and Judaism. So this is just a little bit of that. It's a little more essayistic. Okay. There's a field of study known as material culture, which sets out to discover the relationship people have with themselves, each other, and the world at large. By paying close attention to items, stuff, things, objects, thingamabobs, and who's it, what's it's, things which we have made to exist, we gain insight into our own existences. This field is also known as object theory or thing theory, not to be confused with physics' similar sounding string theory, which also attempts to explain the stuff of everything. 3 years into college at a liberal arts state school in the Hudson Valley, I took a class called The Materials of History, Thought, and Art, which centered on this topic. It was taught by Shakespearean scholar and professor Cyrus Mulready, the first person to tune my sensitivity to things. His interest has since been passed down to me like academic genetics, a heredity of ideas. In this class, we learned about objects that spark joy, a phrase Marie Kondo, a Japanese organizing consultant and author, uses to gauge whether or not an object should be kept or parted with. Objects that spark joy make one feel immediately happy when held. According to Kondo, we keep items we do not need, and strangely, items that don't make us happy. But we don't have to live this way. We don't have to own our bad. Now Kondo has her own Netflix show where she goes into people's houses and teaches them how to purge and organize. She introduces a new way of folding clothing, packing miscellaneous items, and displaying cast-aside memorabilia. Before getting rid of something, she encourages the owner to spend a moment with it and thank it. She helps people reevaluate their lifestyle and establish new boundaries with themselves, their loved ones, and especially the inanimate. I watched up to the 3rd episode of her show, which was about a family who had lost a father, husband. The theme was about letting things go, literally. Unlike the first 2 episodes, where we are introduced to the family through Kondo's eyes, Kondo walking into their house, Kondo with kind hellos, we start this episode without her. I stopped watching no more than 4 minutes in, feeling fired up about the change. I did not want to watch a TV family grieve in their living room before I knew who they were, before Kondo did. I called it bad storytelling. I called it bad editing. I wouldn't have done it that way. There was too much screen time on grief. I am full of it. Friends of mine say they like Marie Kondo's ideas, but not her. It's just something about her, they say. I'm used to how often this phrase is thrown around about women in the spotlight, but I'm never sure what it actually means. I have done deep dives into interviews with Anne Hathaway, Taylor Swift, and other most hateds, and have found that Kondo, unlike the others, is more casually disliked. I consider what her just somethings might be. She is Japanese, she is a woman, she has secrets and tricks to creating calm, tidy, and happy. Yes, I think it is all of it. And also this, she is joyful like the object she keeps. In the United States, we are bad at looking at joy. Sometimes I think we hate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. That was lovely. I wrote down, we don't have to own our bad. I think that's a great thing that I'm going to take away. And also, we got to get better at liking joy, loving joy here in the US. I agree. All right. So moving on, next we have Alex Sniatkowski. So Alex, I had a lot of fun reading your work in last semester in Britt Bennett's class, and I'm really excited to hear what you're going to read for us tonight. Alex's work has appeared in Hobart Pulp, the Southampton Review, Bodega Magazine, and Griffle, and he is in his final year of his MFA here at Stony Brook. So congratulations, and here's the mic.
Thank you. I'm gonna read part of a short story that I started over the summer. So this is part of a short story. Okay. I'll say it again. I've had it with storytelling, with wearing a mullet, with composing thinly veiled autobiographical stories in the first person, which are intended to provoke sympathy from the reader, who I should say I hate for demanding that my work reveals something about the specific maroon of the leaves outside of my window and how the green tint of the veins has an effect on me when the sun starts to crest afternoon, as if the leaves' transformative psychological capabilities could influence the reader and disassemble the limits of human perception so that they can experience the inner life of another, of me, and the effect the natural has on my consciousness to validate their experience living in some artificial playpen of contemporary society. Adult children who want to believe that the leaf signifies a conduit between their mind and mine, because I articulated exactly how they always felt about trees imported from Japan, or the simulacra of a summer resort town, described perfectly how the high-pitched timbre of the Yankee Doodle jingle at the ring toss sounds like a clown birth, or because they are the type who can find nothing of value in my work and find themselves morally superior to me because when they read Portland, Maine melted year-round, they see no truth in it, nothing perceptive, and they'll tell you that they are the type who believes that each person, and thus each artist, sees the world through a different set of eyes and is limited by their own perspective, limited by their self, and that whatever my perspective is, well, it can't possibly recognize any truth. And in fact, because I am an author whose books people have read, I have actively obscured truth for the public in a way that doesn't anger them particularly, because my thinly veiled autobiographical stories reveal someone miserable or depraved who they never want to be like. And they leave it at that because they don't want to admit that the reason they read my work was to experience what it must feel like to date. On second thought, this is truly why my other readers seek my work also. The starlet, who I will refer to as the starlet because that is what I've always referred to her in my writing as, and because my readers know her, and know that they know her because each time the starlet dazzles with a new look from a boutique designer she picked out of obscurity or a new haircut, all of the husbands cut out a picture of her and encourage their wives to try their hair the same way. And some wives demand that their husbands assert that the starlet is less pretty than them. And other wives throw the clipped page away bored. And because of that, I'm not read for truth of experience, because that can only be syntactically formed as a question, as in, what time did it start raining the last time the starlet and I drank coffee on the veranda of her uncle's house in the Adirondacks? And how wet did we get? And will that be the last time, or will we ever get back together? You read to pretend it's you who linked arms with the starlet after she had dyed her hair for her role as Lady Macbeth in an experimental pastiche of the tragedy, choreographed by a multimedia artist who wanted to use the play to explore the iconography of the American beauty, and teased her about it as you kicked an empty bottle of malt liquor from the Bowery sidewalk onto the street because you realized you were now one of the selected, with the privilege to be photographed looking all boho, exiting the East Village walk-up you only had access to thanks to your proximity to the starlet, who had bought the space with the royalties she had made for going blonde and playing the love interest of an international spy in a role that was beneath her, which some people claimed I was, not because they couldn't conceive of her dating a writer, but because they believed if she was dating a writer, then the writer must be good and capable. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. What a great voice in that story. And I wrote down artificial playpen of adult society. I feel like that rings true to me. Thanks again. Up next, we have Larissa Urcia. Larissa is in her first year with the MFA program at Stony Brook. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, Larissa, in Luann's Saturday class this semester, even though we've only met over Zoom. So Larissa works as an attorney on Wall Street. She was awarded the 2020 Deborah Hecht Memorial Prize in Fiction, and she is a Long Island native, a lover of wineries, traveling and running with her hair on fire. So give it up for Larissa.
Thanks. This piece I kind of wrote and I ripped up. It's nothing great, but I'm really thankful that you guys let me read this. And actually, it is also about mothers. So great minds think alike. Anyway, let me start. My piece is called "What Did You Expect?" My palm made a satisfying smack when I slapped my daughter's face. My palm tingled. That was enough. Sometimes you have to slap some sense into your children, especially your daughters. You have to love them enough to correct them when they make mistakes. Kurt told me that you want to leave him. What did you expect? A mother has to intervene before her daughter makes a decision that she will regret. I'm not one of those live and let live mothers. I love my daughter dearly and wish only the best for her. You'll never find anyone as good as him. You have a relationship that most women would kill to have. Look at yourself. You're no prize. Have you thought of what you would do if you leave him? Romance novels are lies for bored and lonely women. Be practical. She stuck up her nose at me while she rubbed her red cheek. The smack was to emphasize my point. She eyed me warily and resentfully, but I got her attention. Mom, I deserve to be treated like a queen. Does my own daughter honestly believe the crap coming out of her mouth? She has an overly high opinion of herself. She lives in a fantasy world. If life does not meet her expectations, she runs from it. She runs from her problems, like her jobs, her obligations, and her marriage. And without fail, she inevitably makes them someone else's problems. Really? After working a hard 50-hour week, he also has to massage your feet and take you on shopping sprees and romantic dinners? Those are fairy tales. That is not reality. I found myself getting irritable. She's a spoiled child. I blame her father. Kurt calls me lazy and makes pig noises in front of our friends. He treats me like a child. He puts me down. He won't let me drive the car. He tells me my makeup makes me look like a drag queen. My bruises aren't bad, but they hurt all the same. He hurts me all the time, Mom. Marriage hurts, you know. As a mother, I have to guide her with facts and honesty to help her see the consequences of her actions. What would you do if you left him? You're irresponsible with money. He's right, you put on too much makeup. Sometimes you look insane. And you just keep making trouble for yourself listening to too much of those friends of yours. They keep giving you advice. What kind of lives do they lead? Do they have luck anywhere near as good as yours? You're a woman that stays at home. Making a good home is your life now. Just focus on that. Do you want their lives instead? Men go through Kelly like a revolving door. Maddie has internet boyfriends who make a living by scamming her, and God knows who else over the internet. Can you really take them seriously? But my friends have good advice. Their advice makes sense to me. I'm miserable. Be on my side, Mom. I don't have time for this. We keep doing this over and over. Kurt came over and told me that you were acting crazy and hysterical lately. That's no surprise. He seemed really hurt that you wanted to leave him. He asked me for advice on what to do. He was crying. He doesn't want to lose you. Does that sound like a man who doesn't love you? I need help. You don't look so bad. I've seen worse. Kurt says mean things, it's true. But you realize that you say nasty things too. Maybe he says hurtful things because you did it to him first. Did you think of that? You're pretty and smart, but you aren't getting any better looking. Do you want to go back to breaking your ass in a retail job and living out of a basement with 4 roommates? All I'm saying is just be smart about it. She shook her head and looked sullenly at the floor. It's almost like talking to a teenager again, all moods and stamping feet. I want to shake her out of her stubbornness. I should not have to remind you that he helps me out with my mortgage. With your father passing away and leaving only debts, you have to see the value of a man who has money. Not many men would take care of his wife and her family. I am her mother. Who else will tell her the truth? She is selfish, headstrong, and short-sighted. I cannot help but point it out to her. Poor Kurt. Don't you ever think about someone else's needs? Or do you only think of yourself? I turn away from her. She touches my shoulder to call me back, but I shrug it off.
Thanks, Larissa. That was great. What characters? Oh my goodness, that mother. Oh,
she's awful, right?
Oh, all right. Up next, we have Kristofer Barr. So Kristofer is in the tail end of his second year of the Stony Brook MFA program. And Kristofer claims that he's more of a conceptual bullshit artist than an actual writer. And I'd beg to differ, having read both his fiction and nonfiction, and we've gone out for drinks. But perhaps the bullshitting is all part of being a storyteller, and it's part of the process. So just own the bullshit, I suppose. Tonight he'll be reading from his novel, which is some sort of sci-fi thing, but he might also surprise us with another piece last minute. So everyone, here's Kristofer.
Thanks, Ariana. And I will be reading from my novel, I guess. It's a messy thing, but regardless, also just want to say before I start that it's a real privilege to be in a program with all of you. Like, you're all fucking amazing authors. Pardon my French, but I'm not going to stop cursing. I don't think I cursed in this yet, but I'm not going to stop cursing ever. You guys are all amazing. Thank you. All right. This is, I guess, the start. Right. They fall from the sky toward unfamiliar ground, early, far too early, before the morning and all its watchers can catch them. 3 agents, blue flames and sparks, lightning flashes generated from the friction, tongues of heat, percussion like a bamboo stick swatted against an empty skull. Their pods are made of bone white and animal, eggs absent of adornment. From a video screen displayed on the interior of their pods, they watch temperature readings and a descending altitude counter, biometric readings for their 2 other companions, heartbeat, blood pressure, anxiety, and in comfort, a small view screen with a picture of the sky. One of these agents, Snell, considers that he would have almost preferred to be on the outside of all this. He wonders how he has never experienced the crackle of clouds bursting with electric discharge, has never felt the mist against his face from where impulse engines vaporize water in the upper atmosphere, leaving trails of superheated ephemeral clouds in their wake. When their pods burst out of the dark light, the sleek sliver of shining metal running dark above the surface of the planet, they'd exited the timeless void and replaced their vision with the blue-gray of morning. Nell, however, has to remind himself that he's not much of a person, let alone a morning person. There is something in the essence of every morning, universe deep, that makes Nell want to crawl back into bed and forget that life ever happens. But here he is. Get out of your head, Nell, the specter in his head tells him. You can see it in the green text of the display. His blood pressure has already spiked. Nell hopes that Gon doesn't notice. As if on cue, Gon's voice infiltrates his pod speaker system. Calm down, Nell. This isn't your first time, so stop pretending like this scares you. As always, I appreciate your unique take on human connection, Mrs. Gon, Nell replies. He scratches at his ear and runs his fingers across the fiber webbing of the harness that hugs his shoulders, wishing there was a button that would allow him to lose himself. Through the view screen, Gon's pod is a nearly invisible speck on the horizon line of shimmering hot air, close but not too close. The atmosphere above crackles with violent heat, and Nell takes a sharp inhale as their pods break cloud cover and snow-swept mountain ranges burst into view. Hazy in morning mists, a gradient from purple dark to semi-sweet yellow-orange sun. What a view! Them's the Firks, right? Pretty, says Red over the speakers. His voice is crackling, barely a whisper. The thing, Nell's specter corrects him, has a sort of boyhood expectation edge on his voice. Wonder. Rid can almost admire that, and Nell can almost admire that. And Nell Spector reminds him that you can admire Rid the same way you can admire an unstable deposit of plutonium from a distance, afraid, in awe. Remember what Rids have done, his Spector reminds him. Remember what they have done. It would be, Gon replies. Didn't you listen to the briefing? Law said we'd be dropping on the outskirts of Reninvesk, small mountain town. Think resorts out of the way, tourist traffic. It's the dry season, and local weather reports a drought. The Chol government bulldozed settlements to keep the locals from preventing sports traffic. It's pretty because it's empty now. She pauses. 3 minutes till we hit the ground. Was that the briefest spell of anger in her voice? Nell wonders. No matter what his Spectre says, Nell can't help but fear Gon more. There is something about Gon that makes Nell deeply uncomfortable. She wasn't what he had expected first they met around 12 hours ago space-wise. He'd heard stories of Gon, instigator of the first Fortis revolt that toppled Headless Hedgeman, that Gon had killed 15,000 loyalist troops with a half dozen words whispered to a down-on-their-luck loyalist colonel, Words were more dangerous than obliteration, Nell knew, and not even a specter could convince him otherwise. Gone is not wrong. This is, in fact, his 13th drop planet-side in the years since he'd been inducted into the agency. It follows a suite of 17 and a half months aboard the Darklight, a sleep of more 17 and a half months aboard the Darklight. He'd been decanted from long sleep for 15 minutes, kneeling in a steel basin, gagging out the fluid buildup in his lungs that tasted of sewage runoff when Nell first caught sight of Gone. They were already dressed by then. She told him that she had been decanted first in order to speak to Lowell, download the lay of the planet from their indexes. She said they'd been getting the briefing from her alone that Lowell would not be joining them planet-side. She never explained why, and Nell had gotten the feeling that it would be unwise to ask further. At the time, he remarked only that Three's company. There would never be any proof, no scent of blood. He would have caught that. No visual scan indicated she'd taken part in a fight, but no matter what his specter tells him, Nell knows that the fourth member of their expedition was already dead. Rid is a machine built for murder, and Nell himself couldn't pretend he hasn't also been party to bloodshed in his time with the agency and for years beforehand, but Gone's very presence tells him that something here was deeply wrong. And that's where I'm going to end with that. So thank you.
Thank you. What a wild ride we just went on. I'm back planet side. Can't wait to hear and read the rest of your thesis. So again, thanks, Kristofer. And we have Rajdeep Paulus, who's going to be our finale reader. I've missed having class with you, Raj, this semester, but it's great to see you here on the screen. It's great to see all of you guys, those of you I've had classes with and those that I haven't. This is really a wonderful program, and I second what Kristofer said. You guys are fucking amazing, and it is an honor to be a part of this group and community. So Rajdeep, she is a YA author of the Swimming Through Clouds trilogy and a second-year MFA student. The piece she's reading tonight is a short reflection of days past and days hoped for. So thank you, Rajdeep. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, just congrats to all the writers and readers tonight. You guys are amazing. Truly a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best. And just to all of those watching, a little shout out to my undergrads. Thanks for coming tonight. And just some good thoughts to everyone out there. Just wishing you all just love and good health and peace during this crazy time and throughout the holiday season and until we meet again in person. Here's a tiny little thing. It's so short. You're going to blink, it's going to be over. And I've called it Remembrance. What I wish I could remember was the time when everyone felt safe, loved, valued, and seen. The time when there wasn't confusion about how to treat one another, talk to one another, listen to one another. A time when even if you disagreed, you could still break bread together, clink glasses, and hug before parting. A time when people said sorry for the pain another went through, regardless of whether they directly caused it. A time when two could wish on a single shooting star, one for rain and the other for sunshine, and rest easy, knowing that they could agree to disagree. A time when sharing is caring wasn't just for kindergarten kids. A time when you lent a hand when your neighbor shoveled their driveway alone, and a time when people looked into each other's eyes when passing on walks, not at their phone screens. A time when time seemed to pass just a touch slower and kisses lingered just a moment longer. And it was safe to keep your eyes closed because chaos fell like fall leaves swirling in a gust of wind, just for a season. A time that was and is and has never been. A time I long for. A time I won't stop looking for. A time that keeps me on the path of hope. Thanks.
Thank you, Raj. That was beautiful. And I think that was a beautiful sentiment to end on. I can't wait to see you all in person and hug you all and hug all our loved ones. But yes, let's keep hope and love and joy alive during these darker times. Keep the light burning within us. So I think that is everyone. So I want to thank everyone watching for tuning in. Is that what it's called? Tuning in to YouTube Live. And I want to do a shout out to all our readers tonight. So we had Margot Hughes, Mary Mannion, William Stieglitz, Hudson Amethyst Hess, Grace Dilger, Karina Cohn, Alex Sniatkowski, Larissa Urcia, Kristofer Barr, Rajdeep Paulus, and I'm Ariana McLean. So thank you all for reading and sharing. Thanks to Frank Imperial for being our tech wizard as always. Thank you, Stony Brook. And thank you to all the folks who are in the creative writing community, both at the undergrad and, master's level. It's been really helpful to have this community, I think, this year. It's definitely got me through this crazy year. So I know we have another reading. I think it's December 9th, Wednesday, December 9th at 7 p.m. We'll have another group of folks reading. Cass will be emceeing, and also thank you, Cass, for organizing this all. And I think that's it. I know before we started, Grace pulled an angel card for us, and it was integrity. So I'll leave us with a kind of serious thought of integrity, but I think integrity can also be light and just let's all live our truth. If anyone has final words, go ahead.
Thanks, Ariana.
Waving.